good evening, everybody. Good evening, all you Zoomers. Welcome to the world-famous Sail Power Steam Museum. We've got a great program for you tonight. Got to tell you, I'm pretty excited about it. We got a whole lot of really exciting things going on here at this crazy museum. My wife and I started this museum, how long ago was it? 14 years, I guess, babe. The world-famous Sail Power Steam Museum, South Rockland's finest maritime museum. Yeah, it's South Rockland's only maritime museum, but this is the finest one. We're a five-star, on TripAdvisor, five-star museum right there on the south end of Rockland. My wife, Meg, and I started this museum 14 years ago. We flunked retirement. We were sailing all over the world, having a wonderful time of it, and by G, 75, when I was 75 years old, we decided to start this museum at 75 Mechanic Street, start a new career there. And it has been growing and growing ever since. So tonight we have a really great program for you. This is a program about sail, the last sailor, the last man standing in the commercial sail game. The last schoonerman. Down in the Bahamas one time, I used to have a 44-foot yawl, and we were chartering down there, and I was pretty big cheese. And I looked around, and my gosh, somebody came over in an 80-foot steel Dutch-built ketch, a real commercial-looking thing. Anyway, I got over and went over and said hi, shook hands with him, and it turned out to be Luke Kenedy, Captain Luke Kenedy. Well, gee, he was startling guy, absolutely amazing guy. And I was so jealous at that fantastic vessel that he had there. So I realized that this was a man that really must be respected. And I found out eventually that he was the last schoonerman, the last man running a commercial schooner, carrying cargo, the old way, the days of yore when they didn't have any of these GPSs and all these radars and things like that. When I started out, we didn't have all that stuff either. And we did it the old-fashioned way, a compass and a lead line, and that was what we had to navigate with. But this man navigated from Canada all the way through the Caribbean, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Amazing, amazing man. Incredible amount of energy this guy had. And nothing but respect for him. So we've got to meet this man and see what he's all about.
Get it over there.
Hey, gee, there he is right there. Look at that smile. Look the smile with his hat skew there and great big hands. Look at his great big hands on him. He is one of the real old-fashioned skippers sailing. Look at that dog. The dog's got the same kind of smile on his face that Lou has on it. Why, gee, they make quite a pair. Lou always had his dog with him. He always had a dog by his side. And I guess it helped him for protection and helped him the long, long days at sea when you don't have anybody else to give a hug to. Over on the other side here, we have his wife, Pat, and we have his beautiful little daughter, Patsy. Patsy's with us. Patsy, can you say hello? Say hi, so get your face up here so that.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you. And I'm glad to be aboard for this evening's adventure.
And here she is in a rum barrel. Patsy, my God, you have only nature covering you. Have you no shame? Oh, my goodness, Patsy, you at least should have a hat on to keep the sun out of your eyes.
I wear a hat now, but I don't wear any clothes.
Well, it's beautiful. There you are, getting your monthly bath in the rum barrel. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, it was in the doldrums. Sometimes we were there for 3 or 4 days, just slatting back and forth, and we just that was part of the day's routine to have a good swim in the punching barrel.
That is really great. I love it. I love it. Well, so of course you didn't need it. You were up on deck all the time, and there was rain, and there was all kinds of good weather, and you didn't need a bath every day. So,
well, it was salt water and playing. That was fun.
when you clean out a rum barrel, that's a good way to get a bath. Well, going on, we first we have to put up with a commercial. We have to tell you all about this museum before we go any further. So hang on, don't change that dial. Stick with me now. We'll run through it just as quickly as we can. This is our new building, the newest building we just put up a year and a half ago. Beautiful, great big building. We have it filled full of wonderful old boats. We have an old steamboat in there. We've got the Light Horseman. She's Weymouth's vessel that discovered Penobscot Bay in 1605. And we have a bunch of beetle cats in there. We have two 12.5s, a Herreshoff 12.5s. We got two friendship sloops and a whole passel of Optimus prams. And right over on the left side of the picture here, we have a schooner in the sand, in the mud, in the front yard right there. You can always go where the schooner and take a look around. Wonderful new building that we have. People keep giving us things, wonderful things. Not too long ago, a year ago or so, we got this beautiful peat color catch given to us. Morning in Maine is the name. And we do wonderful cruises in Penobscot Bay, in and out of Rockland Harbor. We give you 3 lighthouses for a 2-hour cruise. Captain Tyler Watterson, he's a terrific guy, very personable guy, and he will dazzle you with his expertise and telling you about Penobscot Bay and everything about it. It's a great way to try out a little sail if you want to do it. Now, this is what I get excited about. This is our skiff program. My God, this is fantastic. The first thing we do is get these kids and we take their telephones away from them. We stick their telephones in the drawer in the shop. We take them down. The kids are 8 to 14 years old. Some of them have never been on a boat before. They don't know anything about it. Don't know what a tiller is, don't know what a staggerboard is or anything else. We take them and put them through a whole week of sail training. These are little boats, these Optimus prams. They're only 6 feet long. And they take one man, one guy, one kid in there. One kid, and he's got to grab the tiller, he's got to grab the sheet, he's got to learn how to sail. It's the only way to do it. He's by himself. And second day, we push them away from the dock and they get out there after they have their orientation and they know what they're doing. They soak it up like a sponge. The third day, they learn to roll the boat over and right it back up again and keep on sailing. And the fourth day, they really become proficient. They become sailors. And by the 5th day, the 5 days of sailing these boats, it's competition and they're out there fighting for the first place. They're trying to get ahead of their buddies in the next boat. And they love it. They do it. They get so excited that they want to come right back again next week and do it. We don't have the room. We haven't got it together there. They want to come back, and we want them to come back. We have, let's see, we have 22 of these wonderful little sailboats. But we graduated 150 kids from the program last summer, and we could do more. We could take as many as 20 or 22 kids out, and we're only doing 10 to 12, but it's quite a lot of expense. Now, here's what we do. If you would give us $100, we will match your $100 with another kid. So you get 2 kids for $100. And it's just so great to get these kids out there. And if we get enough donations, we can pay the insurance, we can pay our staff, and we can put another group, a whole other group out there and sail 20 kids or 22 kids. But we need your help to do it. If you donate $200, we'll put 4 kids out, 6 kids out, all the way $500, a whole class of 10 kids. What about $1,000? Think of those kids. Think of those kids. You can afford it. $1,000 would take 20 kids out there and really give them the time of their life. Well, that's what we do. We give them free classes for a whole solid week, and 10, 12 kids. So look at this old guy here on the left. I'm the captain. He is so proud because he has really sailed that boat around out there all by himself. We couldn't do it without you. So jump right in and help us out. I want to tell you a little bit about our Sail Classic while we're here. You know, if you're a sailor and you don't want to bother with the maintenance, you don't want to bother with having the responsibility of a boat, and you're a sailor and you want to get out there, all you have to do is join our little club. We've got 2 friendship sloops, we've got 2 Herreshoff 12.5s, we've got 2 beetle cats, we've got a whole bunch of other cat boats, dynamite pacing cat boats, so on, and of course a whole parcel of these little Optimus prams. So if you want to go sailing, join our club. And, you know, it's be very inexpensive for you then. And we pay the freight, we do the maintenance and take care of it for you. All you have to do is go sailing. Got to tell you a little bit about our music jam every Sunday as a community benefit. We don't charge anything for this. This is a music jam that we have every single Sunday, all through the winter, all through the summer, rain, snow, shine, sunshine, everything. Every Sunday afternoon from 1:30 to 4, we have a music jam. And we usually have between 15 and 20 musicians. As a matter of fact, this past Sunday, just yesterday, we had 17 musicians and 20 people in the audience. And they were all hooting and hollering and clapping their hands and singing the old-fashioned songs like everybody loves. Anyway, free coffee. Come, you just come for an hour, come for the whole session. It's perfectly free and just for all for the benefit of the community. Now, if you want to do something bigger and have a real, well, like a wedding or a reception or a great big party, you can rent our tent and rent our tent right down there on the waterfront, right, get rid of that, whatever that is. But our wonderful tent there, we can have a fire on the beach, you can cook hot dogs. We do lobster bakes. If you want to have 150 people over for lunch sometime, just bring them to our tent and there. Just line them up there. There's 150 people getting ready to have lunch. As we say, we do lobster bakes and all kinds of different things like that. So get in touch with us. And no, it's not clicking by. Click by. There she goes. This technology. Well, let's get to the program here. We got to do this. We got to get on this program. There's a nice drawing right in the middle there, done by Rosie Kenny Mitchell. Rosie is one of the other daughters of Lou Kenedy and sister to Patsy. Over on the left hand are the names of the schooners that Lou Kenedy had. And on the right side are the other than schooners that he had, different vessels that he had. The drawing was done by Rosie, and it's a nice drawing, and it's all the vessels, or most of the vessels that Lou had. Now, Patsy, you're going to correct me if I say these things wrong, but that looks like the city. Whoops, sorry about that. Back it up, back it up. Yeah, we're getting it. There we go. There we go. That looks like the city, doesn't it?
The city.
The darn thing. I moved my mouse and it all
Get your mouse going. City is at the top underneath the lighthouse.
Right under the lighthouse, right. And then down to the right of the city, is that the Vima?
And that's the Vima, yes.
You can recognize that hull. Now down and right in the middle,
is Sea Fox.
Is Sea Fox, right. And down in the lower left there is Wallalome.
Wallalome, yes. That was torpedoed during in the war.
She's a pretty vessel. Well, now that leaves Abundance and Adams. Now
they're unfortunately not in there.
Well, there are two other schooners there. There's
yeah, they're just
up above Wallalome.
Yeah, the one to the upper left of Sea Fox could be Adams. But I think there isn't anything that is distinctive for Rosie to draw at that time.
Yeah, I see. Well, it's great. It's a great drawing anyway. Well, let's move ahead then. This one gives you all the particulars, where built and rigged and all kinds of the name, rank, and serial number for all of the different vessels that Captain Lou Kenedy had. So that'll all be on YouTube after we get done. So when you go to YouTube and you go through and you can hold it so that you can read all that down through. We won't take the time to read it now, but if you want to, you'll be able to do it that way. There's the old captain himself with his bare feet on, the sou'wester, and looking up at that great big mainsail. I'm not sure which vessel that was. Can you recognize it at all?
Yes, that's he's aboard Sea Fox.
Is that Sea Fox?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's a proper looking boom there. Proper looking sheet pickle.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, now here's an interesting thing. This is a Stutz Black Hawk. Now that looks like an incredible vessel. That is that is the vessel of a gadabout, isn't it? That's the vessel of a college kid, that a vessel, a vehicle of a college kid that's going around picking up girls and taking them for rides and things like that, I would say.
And he needed it to go to Nova Scotia to find his first schooner.
Find a schooner, that's right. I guess their parents were pretty wealthy, and his parents, apparently they were in the printing business, publishing business. Is that right?
Yes, so Catholic publishing. They published everything to the Pope and the Vatican and all Catholic school books, et cetera, stuff like that.
My gosh, that's pretty incredible. Yeah. So that was a silver spoon that Luke Kennedy had at that time. Well, I understand when he was 18 years old, he just couldn't take it anymore at Georgetown University. He just had to get out in the open and had to follow his star. So he left Georgetown University and joined the Amanda F. Lewis, a pungy schooner, freighting around in the Chesapeake. He wanted a job desperately. So he went, the old captain there, the old captain chawing on his cud, and he said, I want a job. And the old captain says, well, can you cook? And of course, he couldn't cook, but he said, yes. That stands to reason, doesn't it? And he signed on as cook of the Amanda Lewis. Well, of course, he had a terrible time looking down in the larder down there. All he found was beans. So now you tell me if I'm wrong, if I say this anything that I shouldn't. You tell me about it, won't you, Patsy?
Oh, absolutely.
He poured the beans into a pot and put water in there and put them on the fire, and the beans started to absorb the water, and they filled the whole pot right up and overflowing. So he didn't want to show the old captain that he didn't know how to cook beans. He would have to go up when the captain's looking the other way and pour the excess beans over the side, and then jump down and put the beans back on the stove again. And the same thing would happen. The beans would expand. He'd have to go up and throw them overboard again. Oh my God. Well, I guess the crew almost starved. And they found out that Lou knew something about a boat, and he was a good deckhand. He was strong, and pretty soon he joined the deck crew, and they gave up on having him as a cook. That didn't
Either
work.
that or they'd starve to death.
Well, he did that for a while, and then he wanted to get somewhere other than the Chesapeake, and he followed a bunch of old miserable drogers, a wretched life. These old lumber schooners that sailed between Canada and the Northeast United States. And they were great teachers. They taught him an awful lot in his learning days back then, but his comment was, poor food, low pay, and no heat. He did that till he couldn't stand it anymore, and then he got a break. My God, he really got a break. In 1930, he found that the last full-rigged merchant ship in the United States flag, American flag, built in 1883, was sailing on a voyage to Hawaii with fertilizer. Is that right, Patsy?
Yes, yes.
He was sailing with fertilizer going to Hawaii.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, learning all the lines and all the sails and everything on that vessel, he had to learn them in Norwegian because they had a Norwegian captain, but he learned them all. And when they came back, it was hard times for sailing vessels. So that vessel was laid up. So in 1931, he started out and went off to Canada looking for a ship. Went to Lunenburg. My God, he saw so many of these big, fat, three-masted schooners in the lumber trade. This, just like this beautiful vessel here, this vessel called the Abundance. She's a typical stern schooner, three-masted schooner. And he was enamored by all of the big schooners in Lunenburg. Looking around there, fell in love with the whole area, fell in love with the LaHave River and that whole coast of Nova Scotia. He got talking to a man named Harry Adams. Now tell me about Harry Adams,
Well, they had come in he and his buddy came in on the Stutz and arrived in Lunenburg and had no place to stay. And it was really cold and they didn't want to stay in the Stutz. It didn't have a roof or anything. So they went down the docks and they found this one vessel that didn't have anybody aboard or any watchman or dog or anything. So they climbed aboard and spent the night. And in the morning, this guy comes up and knocks on the hall and says, hey kids, get up. And he takes the kids up to the office and we're going to have a coffee and everything. And this turns out to be Harry Adams. And he insists that they have nice warm coffee and some oatmeal and let's have a chat. And Dad tells him why he's there. And he really took Dad under his wing even then, and then through the future days of my dad sailing in that area.
Yeah, told him about the Abundance, the vessel, the Abundance, which is for sale, $2,200. And she just couldn't find a freight for her, I guess, at the time, but they were all painted up and painted her bottom and so on. Oh my God, Lou was enamored by that. He was determined to own that vessel, but first he had to get a captain's license. So he went back and he enrolled in Seamen's Institute of New York. 3 months later, he turned 21 years old and he got his captain's license. 21-year-old Captain Lou Kenedy now. And he drove his Black Hawk back to Lunenburg to purchase his first vessel. Now was that time he didn't sleep out on deck. He purchased the vessel and slept down in it, I imagine. He fit the vessel out, yeah?
Yeah.
He fit the vessel out, purchased it, fit the vessel out, and loaded, well, because of Harry Adams, he loaded the vessel. They got a charter for him, loaded the vessel with lumber for New York City, signed on a crew for the first trip, and got everything ready, and immediately they had a little crew problem. One of the crew thought he was a sea lawyer, and he decided he wasn't going to work. He wanted more pay. And he put his nose up to Lou Kenedy's nose. Well, people don't do that. Lou Kenedy went down, he grabbed his .45. He came up, he said, all right. Actually took him to the sheriff. The sheriff said, all right, you got to go back. You got to do something. Either that or you're going to jail. So Lou turned in and he says, are you going jailing or are you going sailing? You make up your mind right now. Well, that solved the problem. Anyway, they started out, and of course they went down. They got the bad weather. This was the beginning of a tumultuous life. Lost many sails, and there was always losing sails on these vessels. It seems that they had a terrible time trying to keep sails whole. But these were gales of wind out in the middle of the Atlantic. My God, it was hard going. Well, they got down to New York, and of course the crew got into drinking and went on a binge, and they had a hard time there. And that of course was the route that they would do. They would go south, carrying lumber, and then of course look to go down to the Caribbean and come back with salt or come back with rum or things like that. But that would have to come. In the meantime, they had to go in ballast and sail back up to Canada, back up to Le Havre again in ballast. Then they got another charter there, and this time it was to Madeira. So Captain Lou Kenedy didn't even know where Madeira was. He had to look it up on the chart. Went and picked up charter Madeira, and they filled it out, and they went, and with luck, they got a pretty good passage to Madeira. Only took them a couple of weeks. And another vessel left just behind them, I believe, and they were there almost a month trying to get to Madeira. But anyway, went from there on the milk run, went down to Barbados, and pick up rum down there, and he'd pick up salt in Turks Island, and then come back to Canada. And that was the beginning of what they called the milk run, back and forth, doing that kind of a circuit down to the Caribbean and back up to Canada with that kind of cargo. Now, of course, luck was running out. He got into a terrible gale of wind one time, coming back, trying to make it back up Turks Island. and the rudder stock broke off, and the rudder head, the quadrant on the top of the rudder. Well, he made emergency repairs and put timbers and tackles on the rudder. And, it was starting to work all right, and then the rudder post broke off at the waterline, and the rudder fell away and disappeared. Well, now he's in a very exposed position. Northeast gale has blowing. Blow your hat off, my God. He wanted to sail to Port-au-Prince, Haiti to try and get parts and get the thing straightened out. But trying to steer just by the sails and the wind change, he made a makeshift drogue from a spare mizzen gaff, and they trailed that astern on some long lines so that they could gather in a little on the one quarter or the other in order to help steer the vessel. The weather was very bad. It was worse and worse, got worse all the time. The vessel wasn't steering, and finally it turned into a force 11 gale and pinned him down. He couldn't make it to Port-au-Prince. They had to turn for Jamaica. Sails and ribbons. They get pinned down on a lee shore, and the poor old vessel was wrecked on the shore November 5th, 1932, with hurricane winds. They lost everything. No, nothing was insured, of course, but they saved the crew and they saved the dog. And as Lou says, so ends this day. Anything you can add to that?
No, I wasn't around at the time, so it's difficult. I just,
Yeah.
just all of that is so true, and they tried so hard to save the vessel, but unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work that way.
That's right. And that was his first experience. That poor, beautiful, beautiful vessel. Beautiful vessel, and so beautiful, fitted out. He had topmast sonar. He had everything a schooner should have. She has lovely sheer, and it was quite an attractive boat. But it's just one of those things. Tremendous gale of wind. The wind took charge, and there was just absolutely nothing he could do. She was wrecked November 5. Of course, we're talking about the wintertime, and sometimes there are pretty heavy gales down through the Caribbean, 1932. So he turned around back up to Lunenburg, of course, and looked up Harry Adams again. And Harry Adams had another vessel there. It was named the Adams. It was built by Story in Gloucester, Arthur Story, that built all the fishing vessels in Gloucester. But this was built on spec, and it wasn't finished for 8 years. I guess it was on spec, but they never sold it. So he never finished it, and it sat there for all these years. The kids played it and everything else. Well, by 1929, she was already an elderly vessel when they finally launched her. And as curiously enough, it was the last three-masted schooner built in the United States, built in Gloucester by Story. So they launched her, and they got a captain for her, and she carried a load of coal. And my God, they grounded her out near Eastport, Maine one time. And she overhung the ledge, that great long vessel, great huge long vessel. You can see a little hump in her sheer there, of course, right in the middle of her. But she went on the ledge on her port side too, and it was quite a hump on the port side, they tell me. And any pictures that were taken of her were taken on the starboard side so that it didn't show that hump on the port side. But anyway, she was for sale. Well, they made a deal. Of course, 1933, they get the crew of the Abundance up. They arrived to take over on the Adams. The price was $2,500, and they got her ready for sea. At 170 feet, she was quite huge compared to her sisters, and started out for the Barbados. Wow, my God, the second trip down, they averaged 200 miles a day and arrived down at Turks in advance of a hurricane that was coming up. You can tell the lumber, she's all loaded up with lumber there. You can see if I can move my cursor down there. You can see the
Engine.
yeah, artificial stanchions that they put in order to keep the deck load. Keep the deck load on where it's in position in the middle of the vessel. And Patsy told me that, of course, Lou was proud of that because if he ever had to jettison that deck load, if they were in a terrible gale of wind, all they had to do was take those pikes out and the whole thing would go right over the side. That was the idea back in those days. But she could carry a whale of a lot of lumber for that vessel. So, as I say, they saw what looked like a meteor in the night sky. She was anchored to take on salt, anchored right there at Turks. And this hurricane blew in, just so quickly blew in. And oh my God, it went right over the top of the vessel. The center of the hurricane went right over the vessel. Well, the wind turned around, came the other way. It blew the vessel into deep water. She was still anchored there, but it came on so strong that it just picked that anchor up. It was like it was attached to nothing. And off they went in the deep water, off the tongue of the ocean. They had all that chain out and it all was hanging down off of the hawse. My God, what do you do it? They tried to cat it. Well, of course, hanging down, all that weight hanging straight down from the hawse in the deep water, it was a terrible job. They had to get tackles over the bow and fleet that chain in until they finally, after about 2.5, 3 hours, fleeting that chain, and they were able to cap that anchor. In the meantime, the vessel, they only had staysail up, and the hurricane was blowing so hard, they were making almost 11 knot with nothing but the staysail and the windage on the vessel. All the other sails had blown out. They'd all blown out of their bolt ropes. They spent 4 days then, after the hurricane was over and things calmed down, 4 days hove to repairing sails. They sat for 4 days, so sewed sails back together enough so they could sail back to Turks. And after that terrible hurricane, they had a welcome they never expected. Everyone on Turks thought they were dead, they were lost. They had a service for them and everything else. And here they come sailing back in again to load their salt and head back to the north. Well, they continued trading. And the poor old vessel, she started to leak at a rather alarming rate. You remember that hog? You remember that vessel? It was a long time before they finally launched her. Many long years that she was there, and well, she was getting weak. So she was, well, they were pumping more and more all the time. They had a little donkey engine there that they had hooked on her to do the pumps. Well, of course, the salt got into the pumps. They were in the middle of the North Atlantic, another gale of wind, and the pumps all clogged, and the engine finally quit, and the poor old vessel was settling down and sinking. They were 100 miles from any port, several hundred miles for most of them, middle of the Atlantic in January of 1934, middle of the winter. Anyway, the 10th day, whole gale of wind, the vessel settling more and more down into the ocean. Fortuitously, they rendezvoused with a Scottish steamer called Belrusk, and my God, they picked the crew off. The vessel was in a sinking condition. They picked all the crew off and picked the dog off, and they were all saved. And I guess there was only one fatality. The mate, in transferring to the steamer, he climbed up the netting on the side of the steamboat. He got up on the rail, and just at that time, the big old Belrusk took a sea and rolled over, and he was pitched off of the rail, and they never found him. So ends this day, and that was the end of the Adams. Well, poor fella, second vessel, he lost that one. Well, he glutton for punishment, he had to get another vessel. He went back broke, of course, and he became friendly with a man named Frank Muzio. And Frank, he was a auto mechanic, but he talked him into partnering with a vessel called the Sea Fox Shipping Company. Sea Fox was a magnificent yacht. and would be great for the charter trade. So Lou thought, well, it'd be a great idea to do this. So he talked Frank Muzio into going in with him and putting up some money to buy the vessel. It needed rigging, it needed a new mast, and it needed all these things. So Captain Lou got some friends to sail the boat back to Lunenburg, where they found an old spar, an old yurt, and they made new masts from it and prepared her for sea. Well, they sailed her back down to Stamford, Connecticut, and his partner decided that they really should sell the boat for scrap. The lead in the boat was worth more than the vessel itself, and he thought that would be a great idea to sell it. So he was after Lou to sell the boat. Lou said, "No way, I'm not going to sell that boat." So my God, they got on opposite sides of the and they weren't getting along very well at all. And Frank Muzio, he decided he would get the sheriff to come put a plaster on the ship. He was going to take it and he was going to sell it. And Lou, he decided he was going to take the vessel. So he got his friend, his mate, Windy Mason, and they decided they were going to take that vessel away. And he got a tugboat to come to take it away from the dock, to get it away so that they could, with much bamboozlement, sail off and say goodbye to the whole illegality. Well, just about that time, there was a little breeze of wind, and Lou decided that he'd take the lines off and let the vessel drift away from the dock. The tugboat would come and get him, and they took the lines off, and there was a little shoal just out beyond the dock. The vessel blew away and went over that shoal, and the tide was going. He got on that shoal, he couldn't get off. Anyway, he had to wait now for the tide to go and come back again. In the meantime, customs officers were there, and when the tide came back up again, they were all standing on the dock watching, and Lou got the tugboat and they took the vessel. They thought they were going to bring the vessel back over and tie it up to the dock. Instead of that, he went down through the harbor and went to sea. Just he and his mate, just the two of them, Windy Mason and Captain Lou. And they sailed that vessel to down to the Barbados. Is that right, Patsy?
Yeah, well, they went to City Island first, so we could to get some money and food and stuff from his mother or grandmother so they had enough supplies to go down to Barbados. But when they were when the police were looking for the vessel, they went up Long Island Sound looking for them. Didn't think they'd go down to City Island, so they in the middle of the night. And then anyway, so they got their supplies and took off 2 days later and sailed up Long Island Sound and out. But it took them 2 or 3 days for the mainsail and gear to thaw out so that they could hoist the main. They only went out on forestaysail and foresail because everything was frozen.
Everything was frozen, dead of winter.
Dead of winter, just the two of them to Barbados.
And just the two of them sailed it all the way to Barbados. And when he got down there, the customs officer said, "Well, where's your cruise list, Captain?" Just me and that guy. Oh, he didn't believe it. How could that be? Couldn't do that. Oh, well, they did it anyway. That she was quite a vessel. She was quite a pretty vessel. And they are on the way to Barbados without a shirt on. That must have been pretty well down there in the Gulf Stream at that time in the winter. And they fit the vessel out, got her all rigged up, and then of course she was a swift vessel, very fast vessel, being a fancy yacht, almost an America-looking hull. And they would get into the races down there, the Round Island races, and the old Sea Fox first in almost every time. They had a big race on Boxing Day, and by geez, Sea Fox won. So she had quite a reputation down there. Now, right in the middle of all these vicissitudes in 1936, he took the hand of Patricia at Greenwich, and with the reception at the Ocean View Hotel, he took the hand of marriage. And that was the same year, I guess, that Sea Fox won the Round Island race. Is that right?
Yes, that was the first of the Round Island races, and she won it. Sea Fox won it, and her record wasn't broken until about 2010. And they continue to have that race now. And they usually, in their advertising, you'll see Sea Fox is mentioned as the first vessel, and or Mount Gay will use her picture for their advertising. And this same picture that you're seeing to the left is hanging over the bar at the Yacht Club of Barbados.
With a big flag on the masthead. Beautiful. Well, apparently, of course, after they took the vessel, the sheriff had a warrant out for him.
I'll tell you later.
So he didn't dare go back to the United States right away. He figured
he had to stay away for 7 years.
He said 7 years. But then in the meantime, I guess his grandmother, you say, came and...
I think it was his mother or grandmother, I'm not sure, paid all the fines and paid off his half of the vessel to Museo so that there wasn't any record. He didn't have a lien against the vessel anymore, and that Museo was paid off so that now he actually could come back to the States.
Yep. Well, in October 1939, then he got a little restless. He wanted to get back into the cargo hauling business. So he found a buyer and sold Sea Fox to Baltimore Interests. So ends this day. Well, Captain Kennedy's new command was waiting for him, stuck in the mud in Riverside, New Jersey, in the Delaware River, just north of Philadelphia. And that is the gloomy area. I know that area. She was called a ghost ship. She was dripping, rust rigging, hanging in festoons, been in the mud there for 20 years, rotting, tattered, inoperable, and hardly living up to the image of Wawalom, the Indian princess. She was just floating, not even a floating wreck. She was in the mud there. The skipper looked at her, convinced that the main deck of pitch pine was still pretty good, and the steel hull was still sound. He was sure that he could take that vessel and make a proper vessel out of it. My God, the trees were growing out of the poop deck. The masts were all rotted, or 3 of them, all rotted at the deck, and they had most of the way up above that. And, well, just terrible conditions. The water running down through her, and everything was covered with dirt and mud. And, most primitive of conditions. Pat and young Brian, now Brian was born, they moved aboard to help start the transformation. They had no leaky deck, no heat, leaky deck, no galley, no stove, nothing but a heating wood stove. And he hired 2 kids, high school kids, to come and help clean the boat up and come and help do things. Well, he rolled his sleeves up and practically a one-man band, ordered 3 new masts, designed new hardware, whittled out booms and gaffs from Jersey pine, set up shears for an A-frame, took the old masts out with the A-frame, set the new masts in by hand, spliced, served, and set up all the new rigging. Now, I just said a mouthful right there. I'm going to say it again. He ordered 3 new masts, designed new hardware, whittled out booms and gaffs from Jersey pine, set up a set of shears, an A-frame, took the old masts out, set new masts in by hand, spliced and served, and set up all the new rigging. With a couple of high school kids, now he had to have more help than that. But he did all this by himself, my God. Man is a workaholic, no doubt about it. Well, the old sail plan that was on that vessel when when she was a sailor, was much smaller than the one that Lou put on it. He felt that she needed a much bigger rig. So when they got all the new booms and gas, they were much too long for the sails that were there. And the mast was bigger. Well, it looked like all her sails were shrunken. So anyway, when they got ready to sail her, they fleeted her out of the mud there. They would take it on tide. They would let her float up on tide and then move her back and let her bury herself down in the mud again. And when the tide came again, they'd fleet her into that hole and move her back another 100 feet or so. And they did that over and over until they finally get out to deep water and the tugboat could grab hold of her and take her down. Well, they started out. Now she's a pretty nice, delightful vessel. She, with the shrunken sails, these are the new sails, of course, but with the shrunken sails that she had, she was ready for sea with a load of coal. He got a load of coal somehow or other in her. She was down by the head and wouldn't steer. They spent 4 days after they got started, 4 days out in the ocean shifting cargo to bring the stern down and bring the bow up so that she wasn't so cranky. And with these little sails, these pocket handkerchiefs for sails, why, she didn't sail very well. But just then, the captain decided that he's got to do something drastic. He bought a brand new 671, GM 671, installed it himself. When finished, the schooner rates were still sky high. He said, I got to load this vessel. We loaded her with lumber, with lumber until she was all cranky anyway, and quite tender. He said she would lean over with just a whisper of wind. Anyway, luckily enough, the weather was good, and he had to get down to the Barbados because his new sails, the canvas for the new sails, they were in Barbados. They came from China. So with that engine, the engine cranking, he took her all the way to Barbados with that 671, and fortunately, they had decent weather the whole way. Because if they had gotten into a breeze of wind with all that lumber on board, I don't know if they made it or not. Anyway, he got his inexpensively made sails down there in Barbados, bent them on the booms. He had topsails made as well, loaded salt for Lunenburg, then lumber for Barbados, and started the circuit, the milk run again. With good sails and proper loading, she became a pretty darn good vessel. She's not a bad looking vessel at all. Look at that nice clipper bow. Right up in the air now, and the stern, nice little round stern on her, pretty sheer, of course, steel boat, and turned out to be a darn good vessel. The engine ran like a clock. One day, they blew a starter motor. They were at sea, of course, and they wanted to run the engine. They couldn't, no way to do it. There no compression release on a 671. Impossible to hand crank one of those vessels. Real high compression engine. The captain ingeniously rigged a wooden extension bolted right onto the front of the crankshaft, the front of the engine. And through a series of blocks, he connected a line to this round piece of wood that he bolted on there. He took a line up and up through the skylight over the engine and rigged up a bunch of blocks and took a strain on the blocks and put it on the donkey engine that they had up forward that they used to crank the anchor in. Oh my God, the darn thing took a strain and the donkey engines went puff, puff, puff. He rolled that line around the winch head on the donkey engine, and it took a strain on the line, and it tightened, and it stretched, and it tightened, and all of a sudden it went zing, and it rolled that engine and started her. They never shut that engine off again until they got to Bridgetown, Barbados. But they couldn't get any parts there for that engine. So they continued to start the motor each time, like it was an outboard motor with this jury rig, until they got back to Canada and could get parts for the starter. General Motors heard about it. They were fascinated by this creation. Never having seen any of their engines started like an outboard motor before, they created an advertisement with pictures and a whole story about it and put it in their newsletter. Very interesting. Wallalum in 1952. Wallalum was there she is. There she is with the rig anyway. And the boat alongside on the milk run doing her thing. And
That's her anchored right out front of our house on the LaHave River.
that's in the
That's a sinking. Oh, there, yeah, that's the at the house in the LaHave.
beautiful river, LaHave River. Gosh, gorgeous place. Well, anyway, in 1942, Wallalum was drifting in dead calm. Sails were slatting around. The mate ordered the engine on. So to keep the sails from slatting and bashing themselves all to pieces, they started the engine. But German submarines were all equipped with hydrophones at that time. And they could pick up the noise of an engine miles and miles away. So that fine morning with a dead calm and only the engine breaking the silence, the morning watch was busy holystoning the deck, and the Captain Lou was down below finishing his coffee in the galley, and he was alerted by a roar of something under the keel of the vessel. Oh my God, he jumped up. Oh my God, he says, it's time to abandon ship. Everybody looked at him. What are you talking about? Abandon ship. 200 yards off on the port side, a German U-boat number 86 surfaced. And the German sailors popped up from below to man the deck cannon. And Lou manned the dories. And the entire crew, including the German shepherd named Butch, they all left the schooner. The old submarine captain admitted that if they hadn't started their engine, the German Navy would never have known they were around. They were out in the middle of the Atlantic at the time, hundreds of miles from anywhere. They, of course, the Germans, they said, where's your captain? And Lou said, I'm the captain. The German captain on the U-boat motioned him to come aboard. So he did. He came aboard and he started to talk to the German captain and said, he said, loss of my vessel isn't going to win the war for either Germany or the United States. The loss of my vessel is only going to lose my occupation. And the captain of the U-boat said, well, I'm sorry about that, but it has to be done. So Lou said, well, would you tow us in the dories? We have a long way to go. Would you tow us over to Nova Scotia? And the captain and the crew got a big kick out of that. They all laughed at the gall the man had to ask for a tow from a German submarine. But then, of course, it took a number of tries to, they weren't much cannoneers on the U-boat. It took them a number of tries to blow holes in the old Wallalum. They kept missing. And they had to fire off a whole bunch of cannon fire before they finally sunk the vessel. She was doomed. She went to the bottom. They set out in the dories, now 489 miles from the south of Cape Race, 500 miles north of Bermuda, and 1,000 miles from the Azores. Where do you go first? Probably the worst position they could be in. The U-boat captain did say, do you have some food? Do you have some water? And he said, yes, we have a small supply of each. But the captain was ready to make sure that they had something. And he said that he would let people know in 24 hours that they were out there somewhere. So anyway, they started out 6 long days. They were in the dories 6 long days. They were without enough water. They were worried about getting it wherever they were going to get. And finally, they saw a fixed light at night, obviously a vessel, and they let off a flare. It turned out to be the Irish Rose bound for Ireland. This, of course, was the wrong direction. They didn't want to go to Ireland. They wanted to go to Nova Scotia. Fortuitously, while they were underway, they met a corvette, and then it was bound for St. John, Newfoundland. They were only 3 days on the old steamboat, and they transferred over to the corvette and headed home. So ends this day. So Captain Kennedy was land bound. The poor old Wallam he had such a soft place in his heart for that vessel, he decided he would build a model of it. And who is the little lady that he's looking so fiercely at?
That's me.
That's you. Patsy, giving you the eyeball, building
Yeah.
a model of the whale loom. And what were you saying to him? That isn't the way it was real.
I'm not sure what the conversation was that afternoon. Long time ago.
Long time ago, yeah. This must have been quite a long while after the sinking.
Yes, that is the finished model.
That's the
Finished by 2017. After finding the model, some of our modeling friends in Nova Scotia took on the project of rebuilding her, and she was finally donated to the Fisheries Museum in Lunenburg, 2017, and it's there in their museum now.
I see. Yeah. Very interesting. This is a little story about the sinking, about the sinking of the vessel, and quotes the German in there, the German captain. And there again, this will be on YouTube, so you'll be able to stop it when you go and see it on YouTube, and you'll be able to read all of that. We won't go into it now. Luke Kennedy had a dog he named Hitler, and I thought that was very interesting. Hitler must have been aboard when they went off in the dories.
No, that was Butch the German Shepherd. Hitler was in the Sea Fox era, so that would have been in the early 30s.
Oh, the 30s, I didn't realize. Yeah. And who are the people in the picture?
And the picture in the middle are our youngest sister, Rosemary, brother Brian, and then myself and Gabrielle to the right. Gabrielle lives in the Bahamas. Rosemary lives in Jupiter, Florida. My brother has passed away, and I live in New Smyrna Beach.
Huh. So, going on, Captain Kennedy was land-bound, and there's nothing so pitiful as a land-bound Captain Kennedy. And then a letter arrived and save him from this terrible fate. The owner of Sea Fox wrote to him and said, unless somebody buys her, she's going to be turned over to the Navy and probably destroyed. Lou soon bamboozled his way into buying her and was anxious to get underway from Eastern Maryland back when she was down in the Chesapeake Bay. He wanted to get back to the Nova Scotia coast. Unfortunately, in the shoal water where she was tied up there in Eastern Maryland, he got a foul chain around his propeller and had to go overboard and unfoul this chain from around his prop. So he took the chain, he started to feel it along, pull it out, feel it, and my God, he was very pleased to find on the end of it a very good anchor. Well, it was worth all the effort of retrieving all that chain, found a pretty good anchor. So they put that aboard the boat and reconditioned the Sea Fox and ran successfully. From Quebec, northern Newfoundland, shipping seal oil, supplies, and beer for Newfoundland. On this, shipping all this beer back and forth to Newfoundland, they found the customs officers were drinking prodigious amounts of the cargo. And after a while, he decided it was an uneconomical endeavor. A month later, while loading fish and lumber in Lunenburg, bound for the West Indies, a shipbroker called Lou and made a deal with Lou for $1,000 to buy the bark, the city of New York, the whole works, ship, equipment, rigging, everything. Lou arranged for the vessel to be laid up in Quebec for the winter. Freight rates were still very high, so he knew he'd be well off to be able to get this vessel. And he ran the Sea Fox back to the Barbados in spite of the submarines and so on, where he consigned a cargo of barreled rum. He brought many a barreled rum of Mount Gay back on board. $25 a barrel he would transport Mount Gay rum. Sea Fox was a good vessel, very popular vessel. So Lou sold her then at a very good price in 1944. So ends that day. And transferring now to the bark, City of New York, built in 1885, built as an Arctic sealer. Very thick hull, built for the Arctic, built for the ice pans and the terrible conditions of the Arctic. Framed so close together, they almost touched each other. She had an extremely colorful past in exploration way up there in the far north, and many years as a research ship for famous explorers, but that's another story. We don't have time to go into all of that right now. May of 1944, saying a quick hello to his new daughter, Patsy, and 6-year-old son, Brian. He packed up immediately for Montreal and getting ready for the job of overhauling this Arctic exploring vessel.
She was also part of there's stories roaming around that she was out there the evening that the Titanic was hit the iceberg and sank, and she was then Samson, and she was had been out around up in Newfoundland and Labrador sealing, and they had a load of seal skin aboard, and when they saw these flares from the Titanic, they said that this must be the Coast Guard coming to get us, so we better just douse our lights and scoot on out of here. And so the next stop at Iceland in Reykjavik, they discovered that the Titanic had sunk and that they were probably there, and their mate had kind of made that statement, and as on his deathbed. So we kind of have affirmed that they actually were there.
Well, so now he had the job of overhauling the city. She was laid up in Montreal. Poor condition. He would have to jump from deck beam to deck beam because the deck itself was so rotten it wouldn't hold his weight. Lots to do. He very soon found a tug that was on their way to Nova Scotia and managed a very low tow rate. Leave it to him to do that. Arriving at Hawkesbury, he found another tug, the Foundation Franklin, and she's a famous tugboat. Towed her to Snyder's shipyard in Day Spring in the LaHave River. And here, a large group of 18 men went to work on, tore the decks off, and rebuilt the entire vessel to the standards of Lou Kenedy. It was probably going to take 6 months to do the whole job. It was a big job, no doubt about it. But they finally had it done. Lou had already re-rigged the Wawaloom and was used to that heavy stuff. Anyway, the city's mizzen boom was 68 feet long. The jibboom was 48 feet long. The old vessel was so round in the bilge, she rolled quite uncontrollably. Lou put 2 bilge keels on, 72 feet long, 18 inches deep, which made her much more livable. Walter Boudreaux signed on articles for a couple of trips down to the islands with lumber to return with Barbados rum and molasses. And the Kenedy family settled down now to Milk Run, City of New York, to make innumerable runs back and forth, carrying lumber down and all kinds of various molasses and all kinds of things coming back.
Jim,
yes.
I'm not sure, Jim, if this is a question for Patsy or if you know. I have a question from the audience. Who he used to build sails, wondering if he did that himself, where he had so many boats that he was getting in tough shape and having to redo.
Well,
No, he did not make his own sails. They all came in. The first ones, like Sea Fox, as you said, came in from China. The canvas came in from China to Barbados, and they made them in Barbados, and then from the rest was in the sail lofts of Lunenburg.
Thank you.
He said he put a whole lot of stitching in a whole lot of sails, though. You'd bet on that.
Well, they were always chafing. That was from chafe and sun rot and stuff. So yeah, it was always something to do.
Yep. That's Brian up on the mast. Is that
Yes, that's Brian to the left.
is that on the city?
That's on the city, on the mizzen, and then that's myself and Mom doing laundry with a plunger.
That's great. Yeah. And made trip after trip, lumber down and molasses back and salt back, and always rum. Rum was always a good source. The old vessel would carry 850 tons without complaining. Quoting Captain Lou Kennedy, as heavy as she was, the city was a good sailor. She was deep, didn't make much leeway, wasn't a factor, wasn't dead tacker. She usually came about easily enough. One trip out on Barbados for Nassau full of sugar on board. She did 1,000 barrels of rum. She averaged just over 8 knots on the whole trip. Give her a breeze and she would go. After 10 years, the skipper was restless though, and on impulse, Lou made an offer on a schooner called Vima. The even larger schooner grounded on Staten Island mudflat, where she was slated for destruction. He always seemed to get these boats that are slated for destruction or were already destructed, and then he resurrected them. Anyway, he decided to sell the city of New York. But in the 10 years that he owned the vessel, he has never offered a dime for her. But amazingly enough, his luck, amazingly, on November 1952, 2 telegrams arrived. One was from the group that wanted to buy the city and put her on the PEI to Puerto Rico potato trade. And the other was from the owners of the Vima accepting his offer to buy her. He firmed both wires up within hours and changed command. Just absolutely amazing. What happened to the poor old city? Well, he sold her, and the new owners towing her around the Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, she broke her tow line, caught fire, and grounded on Big Ledge outside of Yarmouth Harbor. Her bones washed up on the shore nearby the city of New York.
Many people in that area used her planking to build their summer cottages or on the shoreline.
She had plenty of wood in her for that, huh? Yeah, well, she was the last vessel to carry salt to Lunenburg. She was the last sailing vessel to carry molasses to Newfoundland. Remember the Wellalome, the schooner before? She was the last vessel to carry molasses up the river to Moncton, New Brunswick. All of these sailing vessels now are dying, and Lou seems to be right on the last end of the trail. So ends this day. Over 200 feet long was the new vessel. 200 feet long. Look at this piece of gear. The Vima, 1923, of riveted nickel steel built by Burmeister Wayne Shipyard in Copenhagen. She was the 4th of 5 yachts named Hussar, built for the investment banker E.F. Hutton, and was appropriately appointed. She was replete with gold bathroom fixtures, marble fireplaces. She was equipped with a grand piano, stained glass windows. All this incredible voluptuousness all over her. But she was a mess. The guard dog that they had on board left the messages all over the deck. Everything was covered with mud, pollution, filth, dirt. She had to be cleaned all over. She was in a mud bank of herself. They had to fleet her out of that berth in order to get a tug on her. They dragged her over to City Island. She looked so terrible. They had to paint her topsides before heading north. She looked just a wreck, a poor old thing. Anyway, the job was done. Although 200 feet long, that's a lot of paint, a lot of paint, painting to do around all the way around that vessel. Spent several days rigging, bending sails, fitting the spars, rigging the vessel. Mast mainmast were 2 feet in diameter. The engine was inoperable, although it was 1953, and in the wintertime, they decided they'd sail her to La Havre anyway. So they did. They took her up and pushed through the ice into Snyder shipyard. Through the ice in the dead of winter, sailed her up to Nova Scotia and dressed her up yacht fashion, had Snyder's go to work on her. Spent quite some time doing it. Then in the middle of March, they took 2 tank cars full of fuel, got the engine on, set sail for New York. There they loaded a carload of scientific equipment, 35 scientists and engineers. They decided to set sail for San Juan, where more equipment was installed. This was a charter by Columbia University's Lamont Geological Observatory for a research cruise in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. The expedition came to an end in Galveston, June of 1953, and the scientists left there. Vima was ordered back to New York. They sailed her back to New York. It was a long trip, but they sailed her. The engine wasn't running at the time. They sailed her back up. They went into New York Harbor doing 13 knots from their full sail, had a good breeze of wind, and all the newsmen's boat in their boats followed her, taking pictures of her all the way up to Lower Manhattan, where she was met by the tugs, towed her back to Hoboken so they could remove all the equipment installed last February. During this time, the skipper was cultivating an extreme dislike for scientists and charters. He decided he couldn't take it anymore. So he went home. He just decided, that's all for me, I'm going home. The Vima continued working for the charter party, had many successful years in that employ doing research. Vima was the last three-master sailing out of Nova Scotia and the last big vessel doing scientific work. She ended her days as a pitiful character of the vessel that she once was. Under the name of Mandalay, she was converted into what looks like a motel for windjammer cruises. And so ends this day. Moving along here, we're taking up a lot of time. So I think I'll speed up a little bit. You're not going to make me go to seeing that little thing. Is that you said that, Patsy? Or was
Yes,
that...
yeah, no, that was me. We were scared to go to sea in this little 80-foot boat because it was too small and it wouldn't make it through the seas, and we were definitely not going to make it anywhere in that.
Through the waterfront scuttlebutt. Lou heard of a 80-foot ketch built of steel at City Island. It was their city, laid up at City Island. Typically, it was a mess of rust and not rotten rigging in tatters. Lou says, but she could be had for a song, and I sang that song. So he got a hold of the Alpha. After that, he could fix her up. What the heck? He could always resell it if he had to. Another project, that's all he needed, another project, something to keep busy. This time he decided to move his entire family aboard this vessel and go to the Bahamas. And the summertime, when the kids are out of school, and set up a charter business there and work that boat. What a great idea. So there were so many fascinating places to go down there, idyllic days in the Bahamas, and to have the kids there and all around them, it was like being on vacation all the time. Well, life went on. They had a wonderful time in the Bahamas in the summertime. And finally, one time they had a tiny anchorage down at Allen's Key, small island in the Exumas. An intense gale blew up. All of a sudden, a mini hurricane all of a sudden came out of nowhere, it seems, and the Alpha was blown onto a reef. During high tide, a 6-foot storm surge picked her up and tossed her high on the coral. They were high and dry, had no damage to the hull, other than a few scratches. After removing all the weight, from in the vessel, all the ballast from her hold. They pumped everything out, took everything they could off of that vessel. They had to float her some way, and they just couldn't get her back. The only thing they could think to do would be to dynamite the reef. So they gathered the dynamite, the necessary equipment, compressors, shovel, diving equipment, picks, heavy hawsers, ice, food, and beer. And they set out to bore holes. Friends and volunteers bore holes in the coral and plant dynamite to create a canal to refloat the keel in. So absolutely amazing. After 2 or 3 blasts, the canal was created without damage to the vessel. Still much work was to be done yet. And sure enough, the high tide, she didn't come off. So they set all the sails, and the wind was just right. They set all the sails, and the vessel blew over enough so that she slid down into the trench, into the canal. And when eventually they floated her out, everybody gathered together. They put a line on her, and everybody brought their boats out and hooked on and dragged her out of that little canal. Apparently no damage to the hull, rugged Dutch-built steel vessel. And again, she was afloat. Well, they were starting to put the ballast back in her and all the other gear, and Lou decided it was unnecessary. So he sold the ballast at a very good price, which almost paid the whole cost of the vessel. He decided that the vessel drew less now, so it was better in the Bahamas that way than it was before. So 1962, Lou learned about the Coast Guard patrol boat that was for sale. So he decided that she would be a very good boat for the government work in the Bahamas. So he flew to Fort Lauderdale and negotiated its purchase. He sold Alpha a year later, and she went into the charter business in the Virgin Islands. But eventually her plating became so thin, she became a reef, attracting fish on the coast of Fort Lauderdale. So ends this day. The next crazy scheme Captain Lou Kenedy became engaged in was the Aquanaut. She was a 4th 83-footer built in 1941 by the Wheeler Shipyard for the Navy's Matchbox fleet of patrol boats. Lou became engaged in several movies, salvage work. Finally, in 1968, found a very prosperous but circuitous route from the USA to the Bahamas to Cuba to Capt, Florida, and round and round and round. Did you have something more to say?
And no, I would just that he had a good business going there because we were doing all various movies. The one Thunderball was the most fun, which I got involved with a little bit, and then we continued with her for the Flipper series, and that was quite exciting. And that was government work, was trying to keep the Haitians off the islands, and then some surveys for DECA Navigational Systems had set up different areas of the Bahamas with their stations, and we would he would service them and change out their crew and bring supplies.
Then he found out a better way to make money. He ran this particular trip from the United States to the Bahamas to Cuba to Capt to Florida and round. And the Coast Guard chased him all the way, but they never could pin him down. He was quite active in the Caramico boat lift, bringing Cuban refugees into the United States for many, many, many American bucks. Operating under the Bahamian flag, there was no end to confusion as to exactly how to handle the customs and immigration. And he got away with it over and over again. Yet, Lou still yearned for the transportation business. He was a freighter, and it was in his blood. So he began negotiation on purchase of 2 little 80-foot cargo vessels from Newfoundland. One, they flew to St. John to inspect the new freighters, and Lou found a new owner for the Aquanaut. that right?
Yes, the Cobb's Arm and the Pike's Arm were in Newfoundland, and he wanted to carry
Yeah.
freight, not people.
The Pike's Arm and Cobb's Arm, two freighters named for the bodies of water on the western coast of Newfoundland. They're shallow vessels, just right for the Bahamian waters, so immediately sold the Cobb's and concentrated on fitting out the Pike's Arm. 3 men could easily run her, handle cargo and equipment, efficient hydraulic ram to swing the booms back and forth, power conveyor belt for loading and unloading, and a Lunenburg boundary winch powered by an Acadia gas engine. We have one of those in the museum. Although for years, Lou had been smuggling relatively modest quantities of rum into the Maritimes and taxable goods down to the Caribbean. Now the story of Pike's Arm takes the art of smuggling to a new and unexplored level. Lou became the consummate smuggler and was mighty proud of it, as a matter of fact. New techniques were sophisticated. What's going on there? Go away.
Well,
No. Switch here, switch. Yeah, for some reason, this doesn't want to switch in the buttons. Anyway, new techniques were sophisticated, sometimes more obvious, and always successful, always profitable, and usually quite amusing. The yarns about Lou's contraband voyages to the Bahamas are among the most entertaining of stories. And I think that you're probably right, solid full of them, Patsy. I don't know.
well, yes, all of his fenders were new tires for somebody's car back in Nassau. And every trip was a different refrigerator, and the customs really didn't realize what color the last refrigerator was. So there was a couple of refrigerators coming in every trip. And one time there was the story of a couple of cases of dog food sitting there, and customs wanted to know where the dog was. And Dad said, well, no, I don't have a dog right now, but I just feed it to my crew. And he opened a can and started eating it so that you would see the customs guy. He was eating the dog food. So, but cars and he'd make, because Nassau had you made your own license plate. A lot of cars came in with already their Bahamian license plate on them. So they're even smuggling cars.
And what about putting rum into Coke bottles? What's that all about?
Well, that was a trip to Nova Scotia, and we had 4 or 5 kegs of rum, and that's youngest sister Gabrielle holding the bottle while Rosie watches on the siphoning into Coke bottles so that we could pretend we had Coke bottles around and not the kegs. And then we'd use the kegs as settees or seats with cushions on them, so we could smuggle the rum in.
And you ran that vessel as well, didn't you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And that's the time coming up the Miami River by the DuPont Plaza.
And Lou was laid up during this time?
Well, there was a time there he was quite ill for about 6 or 7, 8 months with back injury. And then when he finally was able to at least maneuver enough, and we'd hoist him aboard with the bosun's chair and the freighting boom, cargo boom. And he'd lay in his bunk up on the bridge, and I was running the boat for him for about 2 or 3 months. Running freight from Miami over to Eleuthera.
Well, finally, Lou got tired of it, the milk run back and forth, and found a wire for Pike's Arm, and at the same time purchased Visalia, a 68-foot catch rig, hand-designed motor sailor. And A short time later, Pike's arm was seized as a marijuana runner and never heard from again. So ends this day. And if I say that on the radio, this is the Phacelia, people would laugh at me. I'd be ashamed to broadcast it, Lou said. So he said, we're going to change the name. We'll change the name to Sea Fox. So Sea Fox was the name of the new vessel. It was May 15th, 1971. 60-year-old Lou Kenedy took possession of a 68-foot motor sailor while he was still running Pike's Arm, freighting to the Bahamas with beautiful mahogany joinery inside this vessel, magnificent engine room that was so capacious, a short rig that could easily be handled by just 2 people, and the catch was going to be his retirement vessel. So, handled by just 2 people, and the only thing she needed was a new engine. The family was still based in the Bahamas with her 6-foot draft. She'd be perfect to cruise those islands. Time to sell all the land-based items, sell the Pike's Arm, and move permanently aboard. They set out cruising leisurely down the inland waterway, stopping, visiting with friends along the way, through the Dismal Swamp Canal, and on down, and running the inland waterway, visiting. For the next 15 years, they did that back and forth to Canada in the summer, down to the Bahamas in the winter, the ideal cruising ground. It was heaven for him. Everybody enjoyed those boats and the solitude. They were fish to catch, gin clear water to cruise, and many miles of exploring. Finally, at 75 years of age, the old captain's legs beginning to give him trouble. The handwriting was on the wall, and as hard as it was for the captain, they put Sea Fox on the market. And perhaps Patsy will tell you the rest of the story.
He sold her and moved ashore on the Lahave River, and soon within a few years, there's Sea Fox under sail. But unfortunately, diabetes took over also, and he lost one leg at a time, and was still happy camper, and went out and did all the things he liked to do, and had a few sails on the Lahave with friends. And we came up on our various vessels to visit all the time, so that kept him happy. And he died in 1992. July of 1992. And then Sea Fox, the new owners, the second owner after Dad, called us and said that the boat was going to be put in the garbage by the end of the week if I wanted anything off the vessel. And so my friend here in New Smyrna Beach and I went up just to check it over, and decided we should take the transom. She was in Beaufort, North Carolina, and we cut the transom off. And I was selling my house, so I didn't really need a bar. So we gave it to Rosemary. It's her bar, and those are all of her photographs of the sailing ships that Dad had through the years. And her bar, and that is actually my Canon though, but it's on loan to her just to make her bar look good.
Very good. Well, we're concluding the Lou Kenedy part of the story, but their story goes on here. This is an extraordinary woman that you're listening to right at the moment, and maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about her career in sailing. Of course, she's got the genes in her. You know that she's a licensed captain, and she's done more sea miles, more green water sea miles than I thought about. So go to it, Patsy. Let's hear about it.
Well, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I've had an adventurous life, doing all the things exciting: car racing, sailing, and flying airplanes. I thought I was bulletproof. Growing up on sailing ships out of Nova Scotia, then to smaller vessels chartering in the Bahamas. Aboard about age 11, was in charge of the lap-strake wooden launch with a Stewart Turner one-lung engine to be available for guests coming and going. I was a captain. Other chores included laundry, doing the brass, and flaking the jib upon the bowsprit. Then sailed my own Abaco dinghy, which was named Tipky. And the meaning of Tipky is, this is Patsy Kenedy's yacht, out of the hotels in Nassau, taking day charters. Racing lightnings and snipes of the local yacht clubs, and also teaching sailing in prams and sprites. Boarding school got in my way, but upon my return, had to get a job to support my water skiing, car racing, and of course, power and sail racing. My first car race was in a Jaguar 120 of 1951 vintage when it burned to the ground. I would be back for more with the Porsche 356C and held my own against all the Bahamas speed weeks before racing ended in 1965. All along, engaging work for Dad, enjoying work for Dad on occasion for movie stuff like Thunderball and the Flipper series, and ran the freight boat a while. I told you about while he was sick with the back injury, and but he was aboard and gave me instruction, good instruction, and I was able to manage docking and running the boat and placing the freight properly. On most of the times I could take a break to go on some larger vessels for the SORC, which was a racing series out of Florida. Some of the boats were Solution, Yankee Girl, Ticonderoga, and finally landing a job with Ted Turner on American Eagle, which was the first winner of the World Ocean Racing Championship. And American Eagle I worked for them for a few years. It was most exciting, and the races were all over the world, and I was just outstanding. I met up with Schoonerman, Bill Bolling, who had a 72-foot schooner in Fort Lauderdale named Alulu, and which was the ex-chauve-souris, which he had just finished rebuilding. And selling her, we would buy a cutter, racing cutter named Charisma, an Islander 55, which had a lot of trouble keeping her mast in place. So we brought her back down from the Great Lakes and rebuilt her with the help of our friend Bob Director, which we then sailed and raced and finally sold to Ted Kenedy, one of the Kennedys with two N's. As you know, I only have one N in our name. The Jungle Telegraph announcing that there's a 103-foot Alden schooner dying up the Miami River. So we have a look, really in bad shape, a rust bucket with nothing working and derelict in the mud at Merrill Stevens. And unfortunately, our offer was accepted and we took Puritan up to Fort Lauderdale for the refit at Riverbend Marina. 21,000 man hours. In 6 months, we sail away for a shakedown cruise to the Bahamas, where we careened her to scrape and paint the bottom in the Barry Islands. Chartering in New England and a trip to Nova Scotia for a proper bottom job, and continued chartering out of Jamaica, Grand Cayman, and Cozumel, and finally selling Puritan to an Austrian. Spending the next few years on a 40-foot Stadell trawler about the Bahamas and the Chesapeake, and another rescue comes along, Pezza Spada, a 73-foot Mathis Trumpy, and another 4 months of refit, and she was in excellent shape for an old wooden motor sailor, once owned by the DuPonts. We cruised and chartered Pez for a few years, South Florida and the Bahamas, to finally trade with some handsome cash for a 76-foot Trumpy motor yacht named by the name of Jaru, which was in decent shape and only needed a lot of varnish and a little fluff job, which we did in the Abacos, mostly Man-o-War Key. Off the charter in Newport and a couple of summers in the Bahamas to arrive in Marathon, where we settled and sold Jaru. We're at Marathon, Florida now. But the land of living ashore wasn't yet for us. And so came along Albert, 120-foot Icelandic gunboat from Iceland in great disrepair up the New River in Fort Lauderdale, with a no-hab Polar main engine with no transmission, 8-cylinder, maximum 320 RPM, air start, which meant you had to stop the engine, reverse the cam, and start up again in reverse. That is, of course, one hasn't used all the air up trying for too many starts. Made for interesting docking. And all the labels and instructions were in Icelandic. Got the main engine going and took her to Fairbanks in Marathon for the refit. We drew too much water for the area, so continued on to Key West and a 5-month refit. Ended up in New York Harbor for the 4th of July festivities for the rededication of the Statue of Liberty, with 40 people aboard to enjoy the sights and of that special time. On to Nova Scotia for a bottom job and see the parents who are still living there and ashore for their 50th wedding anniversary. At this time, we are having Coast Guard problems, like they wanted to board us almost daily. I'll leave that for another time. We can talk about that another day. But just know that rules and traditions of the Coast Guard have been changed, some from our long hassle with the coasties. Chartering out of Costa Rica as a dive ship was the perfect solution for this large vessel, and finally sold her to folks in California for the same business. Now we're living ashore with lots of animals, cougars, ferrets, birds, dogs, cats, and I'm back to car racing about the country and vintage and enjoying rebuilding small vessels at our dock on the Gulf side of Marathon. We sell all, bring baggage and all the animals to a log cabin home in New Smyrna Beach, and now building trails and refurbishing smaller boats. Bill passed away in 2013, and I sold everything in 2017 and have been wandering about ever since. My highlight is a sail on Puritan in the summers, racing around the buoys, and car trips to New England and Nova Scotia, and an occasional boat delivery. Life is good. And I appreciate all your time and energy into this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patsy. Amazing career. A lot of big names, big vessel name there, and big people names there. Quite a career. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll head on now to conclude. This is the 25th Zoom program that we've done. We've done all the different schooners in the Windjammer fleet. We've done a lot of different pilots of the Penobscot. We've done the Gertrude Tebow. We've done the Far North with the Bowden. And we've done even schooner cooks. 25 Zoom programs now, and we'll conclude it. But keep your eye on us, because we'll probably start it up again in the fall. We're going to get real busy this summer, and we're hoping for a really exciting summer. But thank you all for watching. And if there are any other questions, now's a good time to do it. Oh, one more thing. If you want a good read, there's a great book for you. These are my memoirs, 40 Years of Voyage, and most of it's even true. But any kind of
you have any questions, Alex? Ellingsworth. She was built up in Delaware. Ellingsworth or something.
Who was the designer?
No. I'll have to tell you later. I don't know right now.
Okay.
I'll have to look it up. Oh,
any other comments or questions is a good time to do it. Unmute and give us a holler.
Hey guys, This is Peter Boudreau.
Hey, Peter.
Hey,
And
Peter.
I know Patsy knows my brother Lou. Guess
Yes.
who he's named after?
Yes.
And I was going to say that my dad, having sailed on City of New York, I thought when I was a kid, I thought that probably is the most unusual thing anybody could ever do in their life. And oddly enough, I have a friend here in Annapolis whose grandfather sailed on City of New York when it was Admiral Byrd's research ship.
Oh, my. That's
And we
very,
met just casually, and I mentioned it, and he goes, "What? Well, my grandfather sailed on that ship too."
oh, wow.
So it's amazing how life throws you in directions. Now, when I was a little guy, I met you, Patsy, in Marigot Bay aboard the Puritan. Is that possible?
yeah.
Or what's that?
I remember you in Fort Lauderdale when you were on the catch
Yeah,
canal.
yeah. Well, it's great. What a great story, and everybody's done a great job telling it. So
Thank you for coming aboard and listening tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Anybody else? Anybody else have a comment? Unmute. Give me a comment. Give me a comment. No?
That's not.
I guess not. I guess that will conclude
Yes.
then. Thank
Yeah.
everybody for everything that they did, and thank you all for watching. Come and visit us at the Sail Power Steam
Yes.
Museum.
Hey, say Lou and Patsy.
Yes.
Hi, this is Adam, and I just wanted to let you know that there's a program. We've been cruising around the world for many years now, and there's a program among cruisers that there are books that get passed from cruiser to cruiser with the idea that you'll take it to a new port and give it to someone else to read. And we were given, I think it was down in Grenada, another boat gave us The Last Schoonerman, and we loved the book, and we brought it up to, I don't remember when we gave it to Positive Waves, but they read it. They have 2 young children aboard, 2 young girls, and they all read it and loved the book. So really a treat to meet you here tonight, Patsy, and
Thank you.
to
Thank
hear
you.
the stories again. Great.
Well, that's super. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was a tough book to write.
I can imagine. Thank you.
Anybody else there?
Hey, Patsy, Alex and Roland, right now in Calgary, Alberta in Canada.
Hello.
Hi there. We certainly were grateful to Lou when we started our boating career in Nova Scotia. He took us under his wing and saved us from many a mishap, and then enjoyed the year that we spent with Lou and Pat and the family in the Bahamas, and great memories, and really appreciated the warmth and hospitality of Lou and Pat and Rosie and yourself and Gabrielle. I mean, it was really terrific. Thank you for the program. It was really fun to relive some of those memories.
Well, thank you for joining us, and love to you both.
You too, Patsy.
A couple of other messages here for you, Patsy, in the chat section from Malcolm Parton saying, "Good to see you, Patsy. Many happy memories with the family in the Bahamas. Love the tripe and onions that your mother would make." And from Jean,
he was part of the DECA people.
and
Yes.
Jean says, "Awesome story, Patsy. I'd love to know more about you and your cars and your boats. You're an inspiration."
Oh, thank you.
Good. Well, thank you
Well.
all. And
Okay.
stay
All right.
tuned. Come see us at the museum, the Sail Power Steam Museum.
I'll come by for sure this summer.
Yeah, we'll we'll be there in Maine looking for
Okay.
everybody.
All righty. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all.
Bye.
Good night. Good night, all.
Night.